It happened just after third period. The students were spilling out of the building like they always did, laughing, arguing, checking their phones, pretending not to care about the next quiz. But then someone yelled, "Yo, what's going on out there?" Heads turned toward the gate. 2 police cruisers. Doors open. And at the center, a woman. Small frame, tan coat, blue lanyard with school keys swinging from her wrist. "That's Miss Monroe," someone whispered. A freshman started recording. "Step away from the vehicle," an officer ordered. "I work here," she said, quiet but clear. "You can verify with the front office. I was just—" "Ma'am, keep your hands visible." Her hands were already out, palms open, still holding a folder marked Grade 11A essay drafts. "She didn't do anything," one of the seniors said. "That's our teacher." But the officers didn't seem to hear. They moved like they'd already made a decision. One took her bag. The other cuffed her. "You're matching the description of an active warrant," the taller one said. "That's impossible," she answered, her voice unshaken. "You have the wrong. You can explain that downtown." The students didn't yell. They just stood there silent, confused, watching a woman who taught them to kill a mockingbird, who brought snacks to after-school tutoring, who stayed late for kids with nowhere else to go, get pushed into the back seat of a cruiser. Miss Monroe didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just looked at them. Not with fear, not with shame, but with something deeper. Something like resolve. And just before the car door closed, she said one thing. "Keep asking questions." That was all. No drama, no last words, just 3 syllables. But by the end of the week, they would echo louder than anything she'd ever said in class. Because sometimes the most powerful lesson a teacher can give is the one she never gets to finish. Miss Avery Monroe had the kind of presence that didn't need volume. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her eyebrows. And somehow, that was enough. She taught English at East Park High for 8 years. Room 212, 3rd floor. Window that didn't open right. Her desk was always cluttered. Sticky notes in every corner. A dented mug that said, "Words matter." She wasn't the kind of teacher that chased popularity. She didn't try to be cool. But her students knew. If you showed up, she saw you. Not just your name on paper. Not just your grade on a rubric. You. She remembered birthdays without looking at Facebook. She noticed when a usually loud kid went quiet. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just left a granola bar on your desk and circled a line in the day's poem that said, "Even the moon has bruises." Avery Monroe didn't come from a perfect background. She'd mentioned once briefly that she didn't finish college on time, that she worked nights to pay rent, that her first teaching job didn't come until she was almost 30. But she didn't tell stories for sympathy. She told them like building blocks. Little reminders that struggle isn't shameful. It's just part of the sentence. She lived modestly. No car. Rode the bus. Sometimes walked. She rented a small unit over a laundromat. And every Sunday, she was at the library grading papers in the quiet corner near the biographies. The janitor, Mr. Lopez, said she left notes on the whiteboard for him. Not for students. Not for subs. For the guy who mopped the floors. One week it said, "Thank you for keeping this room more honest than the world outside." That's the kind of person she was. So when students saw her in cuffs, it didn't compute. Not because they thought she was perfect, but because she was the one adult who never pretended to be. And quietly, in corners, her influence added up. Jaden, who used to skip class, now stayed late to revise poems. Kiara, who'd once been suspended for fighting, was now the founder of the school's peer mediation group. None of them credited Miss Monroe outright, but they all carried pieces of her. Her phrasing, her pause before speaking habit, her refusal to reduce a person to a first impression. And the strange thing was, She rarely talked about justice. She just practiced it. In the way she gave second chances. In how she graded with compassion, not pity. In how she never told students to speak up, but made sure they were heard when they did. That's why when they watched her taken away, something shifted. Not just in the students, but in the hallways, in the staff lounge, even in the heart of one officer who thought he was just doing his job, because for the first time, justice looked like someone they already knew. And injustice looked like the silence that followed her absence. Room 212 sat empty that week. But her presence? It had never been louder. It started with a routine errand. Miss Monroe had finished grading essays during lunch. She packed them neatly into a folder, grabbed her shoulder bag, and headed out. Just a short walk 3 blocks down to the post office. She wanted to mail recommendation letters for 2 seniors applying to colleges out of state. She wore her ID lanyard, but forgot her wallet. It wasn't the first time. She figured he'd be back in 20 minutes. The sun was sharp that afternoon. Sidewalks buzzed with students and cars. She barely made it to the crosswalk when a patrol car pulled to the curb. A voice from the speaker, "Ma'am, please step over to the sidewalk." She turned, confused. Is there a problem? 2 officers stepped out. One held a clipboard. The other placed a hand near his belt. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," the taller one said. "Description of who?" she asked. "Female, mid-30s, black, gray coat, shoulder bag." "That's a lot of people," she said quietly. "Do you have identification on you?" She patted her coat, then blinked. "Number, I left my wallet at work. I'm a teacher at East Park High, just 2 blocks that way. Room 212. Any way to prove that?" "My keys. They have the room number. There's a school lanyard." "Lanyards can be faked. You can call the front office." "Ma'am, please place your bag on the ground." She hesitated. "Officer, with respect." Now, a crowd was forming. Students, a parent in a minivan, a delivery guy on a bike. She lowered her bag slowly. The second officer began to open it. "You don't have a warrant," she said. "You're being detained under suspicion of identity fraud." "That's a mistake." "If it is," he said, "you can clear it up at the station." They cuffed her. Right there. In front of her own students who had walked out of the building just minutes earlier. A senior named Kiara ran up. "That's our teacher. That's Miss Monroe." "Back up," one officer said. "She's not who you think," the other added. Kiara didn't move. "No," she said. "She's exactly who we think." The officers ignored her. They placed Avery in the car. She didn't resist, but her hands shook. Not from fear. From frustration. From the weight of how easily a name could be questioned. At the station, she was processed. Not arrested, technically, but held. No Miranda rights. No access to her phone. No call to her principal. Just a room, 4 white walls, a desk, a silence that said, "We don't believe you yet." A clerk asked her name. "Avery Monroe." He blinked. Typed. "You sure?" "Yes," she said. "I've been sure for 38 years." He looked at the screen. "We've got an Avery Monroe MONROW flagged from a warrant in Ohio." "That's not me. Can't take your word for it." "Then call my school." "Not our procedure," he said flatly. Hours passed. The staff at East Park called around. The principal, Miss Dalton, tried to reach the precinct but was redirected. Meanwhile, Kiara and Jaden uploaded the arrest clip to TikTok. The caption read, "They cuffed our teacher for walking to the post office. No ID equals no rights." It got 400,000 views before dinner time. And one of those views came from someone who recognized the name Monroe and knew exactly why it had been flagged. The holding room was cold. Not the kind that made you shiver. The kind that made you feel forgotten. Miss Monroe sat in the metal chair without leaning back. Hands folded. Chin level. She had taught students to sit like this before giving a speech. Posture is presence, she once said. Even when no one's listening, stand like the room will. Now she sat like that for herself. An officer entered, clipboard in hand. Not the one who arrested her, someone newer, younger. You've been flagged under Monroe, Ohio system. You sure that's not you? I spell my name with an E at the end, she said. Monroe. Born and raised in Georgia. Never been to Ohio. He shrugged. Sometimes aliases run deep. Or sometimes the system runs too fast to care about spelling. He didn't reply. She tried again. Do you have a fingerprint scanner? We're not authorized to use that for identity dispute at this level. So you're holding me for a name. For a match. A mistaken one. He scratched something on his form. You can explain that when we escalate to central processing. I shouldn't be here at all. He paused, looked at her, really looked this time. Why didn't you just carry id? She smiled, thin and tired. I carry books, papers, graded essays, snack bars for kids who skip breakfast. Sometimes I forget the plastic that tells strangers I belong. Silence. He left. An hour passed. Then another. The air didn't move. The walls didn't care. Miss Monroe closed her eyes and recited a poem under her breath. Not one she taught. One she wrote. A name is a window, but not always yours, for sometimes it opens to someone else's war. She'd written it after a friend in college was misidentified at a traffic stop held overnight, missed an exam, lost her scholarship. Back then, she thought the system just needed better tech. Now she knew it needed better memory. A sergeant entered, this one older, uniform crisp, voice clipped. Miss Monroe, he said, your principal's been calling. So has a council member. Some videos going around. Apparently, you've gone viral. Without permission, she said. What were you doing before the stop? Mailing college rec letters. Any reason you refused to comply? I offered my keys, my lanyard. Suggested you call the school. That's not refusal, that's patience. He flipped through a folder. Still, no ID. Still, no crime. He set the folder down. We're looking into the Monroe file. It might be a database overlap. It might be neglect. Excuse me? Neglect, she repeated. Of nuance. Of truth. Of me. He shifted uncomfortably. You'll be released soon. We're waiting on one final clearance. I've been cleared my entire life, she said. This is just the first time someone refused to read the footnotes. He looked at her. Not like a suspect. Not even like a problem. But like a sentence he didn't understand yet. You'll get a ride back, he offered. I'll walk, she said. Miss Monroe, you didn't stop me from moving. You only slowed the lesson. He didn't reply. But before he left, he asked, why didn't you raise your voice? She looked up. Because that's what the world expected me to do. And sometimes, the most radical thing a black woman can do is stay still and make the system feel its own noise. By midnight, the video had passed 1.4 million views. The number letter teach was trending in 3 cities. The district's email server crashed from parents demanding answers. And on the second floor of the East Park precinct, a clerk finally opened the right file. The name Avery Monroe belonged to a woman in Cleveland arrested 6 months ago. Different birth date, different height, different fingerprint. But the system never corrected the spelling on the original warrant. It was still active, and the machine matched what it thought it saw. By the time the sergeant got the call, his face was already pale. Sir, this is a confirmed ID error. She's not the person in question. You're certain? Absolutely. We cross-checked through Ohio's new verification portal. The real Monroe is incarcerated, booked, fingerprinted, and 400 miles away. The sergeant didn't speak for a moment. Then he whispered, release her. But it was too late for silence. Because outside the building on the sidewalk across from the precinct were 15 students. Then 20. Then 30. They weren't chanting. They weren't yelling. They were sitting, quiet, in a line, holding signs made from printer paper. Essay margins. Old cardboard. This is the teacher who told me I matter. Would you cuff a textbook? Her only crime was not carrying plastic. One girl sat with her laptop open streaming the sit-in live. We're not here to riot, she said. We're here to reflect. If our schools teach critical thinking, maybe the system should try it too. At City Hall, Councilwoman Diana Brooks received a text. It was a screenshot of Monroe's face serene, cuffed, looking straight into the lens. She zoomed in and whispered, Avery Monroe? She knew the name. Back in college, Avery had co-founded an outreach program connecting low-income students to civic mentorships. Brooks was one of the first mentees. Without Avery, she wouldn't have made it into public service. She dialed, Get me East Park PD tonight. Meanwhile, at the high school, the principal stayed late. She printed every scholarship letter Monroe had written in the last 3 years, folded them gently, walked into the auditorium, and placed them one by one on the stage where students had started gathering for a candlelight circle. Jaden, the class poet, stood up. Miss Monroe once said, You can write your way out of the places people trap you in. She wasn't just talking about essays. He lifted a copy of his latest piece. This is my letter to whoever decided she looked like a suspect. He read, She taught me commas could hold breath, that names can carry weight heavier than bars, that sometimes the ones they chain are the ones who taught us to break free. That clip alone got over 2 million views. At 2:14 a.m., Miss Monroe was released. No apology. No escort. Just a file marked resolved and a door that buzzed open. She stepped outside and saw the line of students still awake, still waiting. Kiara stood. We stayed, she said. Miss Monroe's voice was quiet. I knew you would. Then she added, And you did more than I taught you. Jaden walked forward, handed her a copy of his poem. She read the first line, nodded, then folded it. That, she said, is the best revision I've ever received. One of the officers came outside Ramirez, the younger one. His uniform looked stiff, his posture less so. Miss Monroe? She turned. I just wanted to say, I know, she said, but next time, read more than the name. Officer Miguel Ramirez didn't sleep that night. He replayed the stop. The tone in her voice, the way she stood still, how his partner had shrugged when she asked for clarification, and how he, the younger one, the one who should have said something, didn't. He pulled up the live stream footage, watched the video of the students holding signs, watched the poem, watched himself, blurred in the background, doing nothing. That stung more than any comment section ever could. He thought of his sister, 3 years younger, a high school teacher too, taught ESL, had the same kind of eyes as Miss Monroe soft, but sharper than most men in charge. That morning, he walked into the precinct early. The sergeant glanced up. Could have stayed home, he said. I couldn't, Ramirez replied. He sat at his desk, opened a tab, typed in, how to file internal concern regarding mistaken detainment. The screen blinked. He stared at the form for 5 minutes, then closed it. He wasn't ready for that yet, but he was ready for something. That afternoon, he walked to East Park High. No badge, no squad car, just a plain blue shirt, a folder tucked under his arm. The security guard recognized him but didn't say anything. Ramirez asked for the principal. She led him to room 212. Miss Monroe was at her desk, alone, grading papers. A half-eaten granola bar sat beside a stack of essays. She looked up. Their eyes met. Miss Monroe, he began. Officer Ramirez, she said without anger. I came to apologize. You already did, she replied. Not officially. I don't need official, she said. I need honest. He paused, then opened the folder. Inside was a printout of a typed letter addressed to the department, requesting internal training on implicit bias and identity verification procedures. Below it, his signature. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, he admitted. It went here, she said, tapping her chest. He hesitated again. "Can I ask one thing?" She nodded. "Why didn't you say more? Fight more?" She smiled. "Because every minute I spent yelling would have made me look more like what the system expected. And I'm done being who they think I should be." Ramirez swallowed hard. "I've got a sister," he said. "She's a teacher too. If someone cuffed her like that..." His voice cracked. Monroe stood, walked over, and placed a hand on the letter. "Then make sure no one ever does." He nodded once. Not out of closure, but out of responsibility. Then he turned and left. And as the door closed behind him, he realized something. The woman they'd silenced hadn't lost her voice. She had just made the whole room listen harder. They offered her a public apology. She declined. They offered her a feature in the district newsletter. She declined. They offered her a legal settlement. She declined that too. "I didn't come here to be compensated," she said. "I came here to teach." And so she did. Every day after the incident, Miss Monroe returned to room 212. On time, quiet, no speeches. Just lessons. Just books. Just the kind of presence that didn't need press. But something had changed. The walls seemed to stand straighter. The students listened longer. And every time she walked through the halls, people nodded. Not out of pity, but out of recognition of how close they'd come to losing someone they never really saw clearly until she was gone. Kiara organized a petition. It wasn't angry. It was procedural. She demanded the school district revise its protocol on staff identification and police involvement on campus. She cited 5 policies, quoted case law, used phrases Miss Monroe had underlined in the margins of her essays. It passed unanimously. On the day of graduation, the gym was packed. Folding chairs, gowns, nervous parents. Jaden was valedictorian. He stepped to the mic, straightened his tie, and unfolded a piece of paper. "I had a speech prepared," he said, "but I think what needs to be said was already taught." He turned to the side, looked at Miss Monroe sitting in the front row. "This is for the teacher who taught us how to write," he said, "not for tests, but for truth." He began to read. Asterisk. She didn't teach us to fight. She taught us to stand still, and still stand. She didn't teach us to win. She taught us not to lose ourselves. She didn't teach us to fight. She taught us to stand still, and still stand. Asterisk. The room fell silent. Not out of awkwardness, but reverence. And when he finished, there was no applause. Just the sound of one teacher exhaling quietly, as if the weight she'd carried for years had finally been understood. After the ceremony, someone asked if she'd take a picture for the newspaper. She said no. "But you should take one of them," she said. "They're the story. I'm just the margin note." Miss Monroe never raised her voice. But somehow, the world heard her anyway. She didn't march. She didn't sue. She didn't post threads online. She showed up. She stayed. And she stood without needing to stand on a stage. This wasn't a story about a wrongful arrest or a system glitch. It was about what happens when quiet dignity collides with careless power and chooses not to shatter, but to shine. If this story made you pause, even just for a breath, then share it. Share it for the teachers who carry more than lesson plans, for the women who are told to prove they belong, and for every student who learned what courage looks like, not from speeches, but from silence that refused to fold. Here at Hidden Justice, we don't chase headlines. We reveal the moments the world almost missed, and the people who held truth quietly until someone finally listened. If you believe these stories deserve a voice, subscribe. Not for us, but for those who taught us how to read between the lines. So if you're still listening, maybe you were meant to. Not to speak louder, but to listen deeper.